Please welcome to the stage Jackie Puente, Vice President of External Affairs of Comcast Corporation.
Great to see everybody. And I don't know if everyone was at that reception too late last night. I feel like we got to pump up the energy around here. On behalf of Comcast, NBC Universal, and Telemundo, it's wonderful to be here this morning in this room. And one thing I'll say to amend to Michelle's comments is I don't think anybody here should apologize for being a geek or too excited about technology, because I look out at this room and see so many faces of corporate partners, longtime HTTP supporters. And this is really what brings us all together. And the energy and intelligence in this room and how we can inform all these debates is just so impressive. So no one apologize, dig into it. I also see so many wonderful young faces of summer associates and first-time people. And that's really wonderful because today's program really does cover so many important fundamental issues as we're talking about policy that, as Angelina rightly said, extends across all issues facing our economy. As a moment of personal privilege, I also want to make an important announcement. You may not know that today is a new holiday. It's Dia Nacional de Football. So our Comcast Telemundo family is very busy celebrating 1 year out to the World Cup. So you may not see me for a while after this, but thank you, everybody, for all your support. And we're really excited closing in on 1 year to the World Cup today. I want to thank Judan, Chris, and Brent for all of their hard work and creativity putting today's program together. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to open this panel up about small business. As many of you know, in addition to my day job at Comcast, I'm super proud to chair the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Business, small business, entrepreneurship is something that I'm so passionate about. And I'm so proud that the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has been a longtime partner and founding member of HTTP. A lot of my work around, the Hispanic Chamber has been about modernizing the organization and looking to integrate our advocacy around entrepreneurship and small business. And for that, I'd like to make another plug for the public policy platform that USHCC has on their website. And I think you'll see that many of the issues we're talking about today, whether we're discussing ACP and USF, AI, whether we're talking about privacy, all these future issues are really part of the public policy platform. And it's an easy to use resource as you're having conversations with the Hill. And I will say one of the wonderful things about HTTP and the work that Judan has done this year is really taking these messages, taking this discussion to Capitol Hill and having conversations on both sides of the aisle representing our community. So let's give Judan one more round of applause. One last thing I want to talk about as we get into the small business panel here today is the importance of community Wi-Fi. This isn't on the agenda, but it's very important to us at Comcast, and I think to many in this room, as we're thinking about policies that help support the ecosystem for small businesses to grow and thrive. So I'll throw that out there that at Comcast, we're working very hard to secure Wi-Fi availability and Wi-Fi continuity for all of the businesses. You think about this conference right now, everyone's plugged in, connected to their device. And so I want to thank everybody in this room for their continued advocacy on this important issue. With that, I'm going to introduce the moderator of this next panel, Lorena Molina Izarri, co-founder and co-CEO of One Eye Labs, and she'll introduce the great panel we have ahead. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to HTTP for inviting me to moderate the panel. I'm really excited. It's a critical conversation to have in the intersection of how businesses are equipped and what are the opportunities and challenges for digital transformation and digital adoption for our economies. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce and bring on stage Alan Gutierrez, Director of the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization at the U.S. Department of Transportation, who will focus on digital infrastructure as critical for small businesses' participation in federal contracts. We also have with us the Honorable Don Graves, former U.S. Deputy Secretary of Commerce and Fellow of the Georgetown Institute of Politics and Public Service. And Dacry, thanks for joining us. Dacry Ryan Mercado. She's a founder and CEO of Éxito & Company. Will bring a small business and innovation lens to the conversation, particularly around the data equity and digital readiness. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And just a quick shout out, if you can mute your mics while the other one is speaking so we don't have feedback. So we want to start with just a broad question that I think each of you from your lens and your vantage point you can address uniquely. We know that technology adoption can be a huge lift for small businesses, and what that does for local economies. What are the most urgent digital infrastructure needs that you see in the Latino communities today, and how does a multi-sector approach to that work play a role?
No, good morning. Great to be here. I agree with Jackie. Everyone seems like a little bit like to stand up and like jump up and down for like 10 seconds to get that blood flowing. But great conversations and great panels this morning, and certainly glad to see a lot of folks that I know, and happy to be here on the panel. I think that digital transformation is important, right? And in all facets for us on our daily lives, but certainly for small business from that standpoint. We at the Department of Transportation, from that standpoint, we're looking at a lot of the streamline approaches, because I think not only is digital important in that sense, but if you streamline for small business, a lot of times small business are wearing multiple hats, a lot of different things. So we're looking at the procurement process. We're looking at consolidation at the agency, looking at also the burdensome for small business as it relates to regulation. That's another area that I think that is not talked about much, but certainly for us that we're focusing on, because regulation, there's estimates of annually for a small business, you're looking at 10,000 plus to accommodate as it relates to regulation. So we're looking at very actively from our leadership, from the secretary, from that standpoint, on all facets there in that perspective. So we see that as an environment that's important to create and keep focusing on for small business. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more later as it relates to contract opportunities at transportation and other areas, but that's how I see it from that standpoint.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here, and thanks to HTTP and for hosting this conversation. For small business, I think you have to take a little bit of a step back to recognize that not all small businesses, not all entrepreneurs are created equal. And we heard in the last panel that when you think about technology, the way that a lot of people think about it is, oh, it's this thing. No, technology is the enabler that allows you to get further ahead in whatever you're trying to achieve. So it's important to think about, for a small business, for an owner, to think about what they're trying to achieve using technology. For instance, I think there are one of the biggest challenges that small businesses face today is a lack of sophistication around cybersecurity. It's a huge issue that affects tens of thousands of businesses. The loss of data, the loss of information, compromising of their systems. It doesn't require a whole lot of preventative maintenance to do it, but I think a lot of people are scared. A lot of entrepreneurs are scared because they don't know what to do. I can tell you that at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration at Commerce, our former employer, there are tools that you can use to build that cybersecurity into your system. There's also a reticence to get deep into some of the critical and emerging technologies like AI, because everyone hears about it, sort of think, oh, AI is taking over the world, but I don't know how to use it for my business. There are a wealth of information sources on the internet. If you aren't using AI as a small business yet, you should be thinking about the ways that you can use AI to be more effective in delivering whatever your overarching goal is. But the point here is that you should be thinking more proactively about, as I said, tech as an enabler, thinking about collection of data and using data more effectively in your business. The last thing that I'll go to is we heard about the access to broadband, high-speed internet. It's absolutely something that is critical for the nation. I want to thank Comcast for all that they have been doing as partners in ensuring that the country has access to high-speed broadband, especially affordable high-speed internet. This is going to be ramping up over the next few years. You're going to see local communities deploying more effective networks, building the last mile and the middle mile. But as entrepreneurs, you should be talking to your local governments to make sure that they're delivering it effectively to you, that you're taking advantage of the local programs that Comcast and so many others are providing to those communities. That will enable you to be more effective to deliver your services and products to the community.
Thank you. Hola, mi gente. I'm so happy to be here with y'all and my wonderful panelists. If you're not sure who the entrepreneur on the panel is, just look for the sneakers. I'm really glad that you asked this question, and I really appreciate y'all's answers. I think, I recently was watching that scene from Miss Congeniality where the Miss USA pageants are answering their questions and they're all like, world peace and world peace. I think that's going to be me a little bit today on broadband access. I think we talk about digital empowerment, innovation, and sometimes we forget to mention that a third of the Latino community still does not have access to broadband at home. So that includes some small businesses. When we're thinking about mercados, landscaping businesses, the family restaurant, they might not have robust affordable broadband. And so kind of expecting them to be able to scale up to some of these other innovation solutions like automation, AI, data security and privacy, there's a gap there. And I think the last panel really spoke well to this, in that we have to reframe this issue, and that it's not necessarily a technology issue, it's an infrastructure issue. This is something that is impacting every single person in our community, and the affordability piece, I think, is really important too.
Thank you so much. And I love that you mentioned infrastructure as a critical kind of baseline problem, because that comes along with collaboration, and it comes along with partnership, and it comes along with sometimes even compromise. From the point of view of, and I'm going to go kind of deep into your own backgrounds and perhaps bring that lens to the forefront. What is the office doing in respect to have more tactical approaches and how to connect the problem, how to address the problem of infrastructure to the opportunities that federal government has and the state local government cooperation that needs to happen in this space?
Yeah, no, sure. First of all, I wanted to recognize part of my team here, Mr. Manny Rosales and Leo San Ramon, that are here with me as well, part of the office. So glad there's resources as well. We say, go to Leo if you have any questions. He's going to laugh at me at that part. But no, it's critically important, right? I think from all on the federal contracting perspective that I mentioned, streamlining. There's a lot of that we're looking at in terms of the burdens as it relates to the federal acquisition regulations. That's being very proactively looked at on looking at and this is ongoing. Forecasting, very important on the technology basis. So everything's going to be more on a one approach, meaning that it's going to be at GSA, where the small businesses can have a one-stop shop to look at the different areas, the opportunities within different federal agencies and contracting. From our standpoint at Department of Transportation in my office, Hostabooz, is really to engage. We're talking about helping that small business, and a lot of times small businesses don't know what they don't know. So we have like 3 different vehicles. I was at 3 different lanes, pun intended, with DOT. But we have the connection marketplace that's available, and that's on our system that is very technology driven, where the small businesses are able to upload their information, able to engage with our office in that sense, with our small business specialists, to help them engage of what are the areas that they are interested in within Department of Transportation at DOT. The other area that we have is also we have the the area of bonding. And something very critical and important in that aspect is small businesses as they compete, with opportunities across both on the federal, state, and so forth. This bonding education program really provides all the tools and services. It's a curriculum-based cohort that really helps them be more acclimated and really work hand in hand with the private sector to be able to be ready for being either prime or subprime contractors. Lastly, we have over 11 different centers across the country, the small business transportation resource centers from that standpoint. So in that aspect, they're hands-on approach, one-on-one, very specific. These centers are very acclimated and our hands-on approach of what are the different opportunities that are coming about with DOT in that particular region. From that standpoint. Lastly, I'll say a little bit of a footnote. I know a lot of the different carriers are here, and I think small business in itself now, before there wasn't, but I would say whoever they're affiliated with the different carriers, a lot of it, there's a bundle approach too, right? They have a one-stop shop with all their different needs of, the Wi-Fi and payments and so forth. So I think that is also another vehicle for small business, because we hear, unfortunately, when small businesses end up going to different providers that are either taking advantage of them and so forth, and it's all on a one-stop approach. I think that's another important vehicle from a private sector perspective from that standpoint. So hopefully that gives you an overview, the audience, in terms of what we're doing at DOT, but also at the other agencies as well from that standpoint.
Thank you so much. So question, Don, from your past role, you had an opportunity to see the opportunity and perhaps sometimes a disconnect of collaboration and communication that happens at different levels of government, but also engaging in partnership with local organizations. How can these different levels and structures better collaborate together and more effectively to support the empowerment of digital and data infrastructure in this sense, but specifically focus on Latino entrepreneurs?
It's a great question, and we learned, unfortunately, the hard way in Puerto Rico as we were trying to rebuild infrastructure and create real opportunities coming out of the hurricanes in the work that we were doing. So that provided us with, I think, a great case study of how you can do all the things that you just mentioned, create the connections, have a holistic approach, and make sure that that people have the ability to have a one-stop approach to this work. The incentivization is perhaps the biggest challenge, because you have local actors, state actors, or territorial actors. You have federal actors that all have their own incentives, their own desires, and too often you have these folks who are sort of competing with one another to get credit, to go in the direction that they want. So having alignment amongst the stakeholders was perhaps the hardest thing, but it's the most critical piece of being able to deliver for small businesses, for emerging entrepreneurs and the like, because they see a federal government, a state government, local government, and local actors. And they say, who do I go to? How do I navigate all these different systems? It's absolutely incumbent upon governmental actors to work together. Transportation has done a fantastic job, especially in the small business procurement space, of having alignment at the local, state, and federal level. But that is not the case, as many of you know, I'm sure, across government. So there has to be more alignment to deliver directly for these businesses. One of the things that we worked on very specifically was ecosystem building in local communities. You think about things like tech hubs, that program that was created in the previous administration by the CHIPS and Science Act. You think about the NSF engines or the hydrogen hubs or Build Back Better regional coalitions. You start putting together, the federal funding was aligned really nicely to support this local ecosystem that's focused on a specific technology or a specific local system that would support the development of these and growth of these small businesses. So the ecosystem building is critical. There's a lot of these folks out there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go to them, help them rebuild their ecosystem, or continue the work that they're doing. So that's really what needs to happen. And then the capital has to flow alongside these ecosystems that are being built around the country, because without capital, without bonding capacity and the like, these small businesses are never going to be able to capitalize on the opportunities that are going to be coming as a result of these major projects and major investments.
Thank you. And I think looking at system change from an ecosystem mindset, it's really critical. And I think that, Decker, you actually brought it back to the kind of first line, which is access. And access to broadband is an absolute foundational requirement to participate in the digital economy. Can you also speak, working with Latino entrepreneurs, how do you see the opportunities to better understand their digital landscape, but also from a data equity perspective? I know we talked about data equity quite a bit when we connected. What do you think that in that space, how do we better communicate to the Latino business owners how important it is to not only leverage the digital technologies and having the access, but once you're set up, there's some level of infrastructure in the ecosystem, where does data equity and understanding the value of data come to play for their competitiveness?
Absolutely, thank you. I think for background, at Éxito & Co, we specialize in community engagement, advocacy campaigns, digital storytelling, and other kind of visibility services like narrative shift and creative design, stuff like that. And so the majority of our clients are nonprofits, but I am a member of a very special club, the Latina Founders Club. So, even though we are the fastest growing population of small business owners, it's still a pretty small club. And I think when I think about the most successful amongst those entrepreneurs, I think about folks who really know how to use the data that they collect for the curation of community and really specialized services and goods. But I don't know that that's the case for the majority of Latino small business owners. My in-laws have owned a landscaping business in Sacramento, California for 35 years. And every month, my father-in-law handwrites his invoices, hands them to his clients, they write a check, and my mother-in-law, my suegra, tallies them up by hand on a sheet of paper and takes them to the bank to deposit them. And it's a very old school way of approaching it, right? But that's what they trust. And it's very disruptive to try and change that, right? So the idea that, hey, there's a program called QuickBooks or, any other tool where, they even have AI mechanisms that'll help categorize some of these expenses for you that make your life easier come tax time. That's very disruptive, and that's very foreign to them. And so I share that anecdote because I think there are a lot of Latino business owners that maybe don't understand what kind of data they have access to or ownership of, and how they can utilize that to, maybe create some automation or save themselves time. And so I think there's a foundation of education that needs to happen. And, I think we see kind of these tropes in the movies, right? Of like the family-owned business and the digital native kid comes back from college and has all these ideas on how to modernize. But that's real life for a lot of these family businesses, Latino entrepreneurs, right? And so I think we'll start to see that, but I think programs, tools to support those type of businesses to develop and integrate those type of practices without fully disrupting their businesses will be really important.
Alan, question around community-led organization engagement. How can you share some examples and plans on how to engage with these organizations and industry partners to ensure that small businesses are equipped to participate in the digital economy?
Going back to your mentioning about everything handheld and putting all, it just brought me unfortunate flashback of during COVID, in my days at SBA, and we were, trying to work and engage with all small business across the country on the PPP loans, right? And unfortunately, we ran across a lot of what you were mentioning because a lot of it's technology driven. Where's your P&L statements? Where's your income statements? Where's and unfortunately, a lot of the small businesses were not keeping that on an electronic basis. Everything was handheld. So that delayed the process, unfortunately, for a lot of small businesses, especially in our community in that sense. So clearly, digitalization and having all that certainly is a key component. Going towards in terms of like our community led and how do we work together, certainly at DOT, with the leadership of Secretary Duffy, we're looking at all that we can do to streamline, like I mentioned, but also the important part of AI in that sense. We recently, my office had a session with around 80, 90 small businesses and working with them on the importance and the steps of AI and how that would help and lead into that environment as it relates to opportunities with the federal contracting arena from that standpoint. The other thing is we have a contract that we have with this disabled veteran, his small business, in terms of having that community, the marketplace that's available. But not only that part, actually yesterday, perfect timing in that sense. We didn't do it yesterday because I was going to speak here today. But with Watson, IBM Watson, and a collaboration with the veteran small business, we're looking at a very forward-thinking approach that we hope to roll out that incorporates AI into engaging, in a marketplace like this, but very virtually and AI driven, that not only for you as a small business owner, but guess what? On the other side, the important part of it, on the contracting officers, because a lot of times, the contracting officer, there's a contract that's going to be let out and they're looking for qualified individuals. This AI approach that we're looking at will hopefully provide that more faster approach, but also more validating approach as it relates to the different businesses that will be available and their past performance, what they have done, what's the relationship with other agencies in that sense. Because then, we as an agency will want to take that risk, create that environment for opportunities for all small businesses. This will help that particular inside the ballpark, our contracting offers. So AI really important in that aspect, as it relates to the federal marketplace arena that we're looking at. On the flip side, on the ecosystems, as Mr. Graves was talking about too, certainly, with all the different organizations in terms of incorporating that and helping small business to really, be online, be available on search engines, be all that's critically important. And especially in our community, I know that we use the cell phone more than any other community, and that opportunity of being, have your website that's, also, sell ready in that sense. A lot of times they don't, and they don't recognize that. So I add that little tidbit footnote that I think it's important as well.
Excellent, thank you. And when we think about the integration of the incentives, and as Mr. Graves said, with industry and the incentives that local governments have or community-led organizations have, there's an important element around public policy and who's driving the narrative in the public policy space. Where do you think the most overlooked opportunities are to engage in public policy discussions when it comes to supporting Latino-owned businesses and driving forward a strategic narrative around where the investments need to go?
The biggest challenge that policymakers have is assuming that the Latino community is monolithic. We all know that that's not the case. It's not just that Latinos are owning bodegas and mercados and landscaping businesses. Yes, of course, that is in the community, but it's a whole range of businesses in every industry. And I think that that the community needs to ensure that policymakers recognize that the Latino community is for every industry, and it's you have very sophisticated businesses that are doing things like crypto and engaged in AI and the latest technologies, while at the same time you have the mercados and landscape businesses. So, and everything in between. So that's perhaps the first thing that needs to happen. And hopefully HTTP and the partners can help remind policymakers that the Latino community is in every industry. On the flip side, as we all know, the Latino community is also a huge market opportunity for partnership, for engagement. And as these small businesses get started and grow and scale, the policymakers need to be developing specific policies to meet where these Latino businesses are and where they're going. The challenge is that broadband policy, for instance, high-speed internet policy, is effective at a national scale, but delivering high-speed internet to local communities, particularly the digital literacy, the capabilities, the access, the affordability, has to be more specifically delivered to individual communities and individual members of that community, because not everyone is meeting them at the same space. The last thing that I'll say, and this is something that I know Lorena has spent a lot of time on, there is a wealth of data from the Latino community. Just a wealth of data that the Latino community needs to use effectively for a wide range of policy reasons and for economic opportunity. I think that we sort of forget that the community is the fastest growing community in the country. And if for Latino businesses to tap into that data and use it effectively using digital tools, it's a powerful way to grow your business and to expand into markets that I think a lot of major businesses sort of forget about or don't pay enough attention to.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug, piggybacking on that, because data is absolutely critical for small business owners, especially in the Latino community, to grow. And I know we have a colleague of Census somewhere in the back. I come from the Census family. There's a platform. There's a tool called the Census Business Builder. The Census Business Builder is really an optimal data tool for business owners to understand their market, to understand their users, to understand their clients, to do market research. The data aspect is not just how you use the data as a small business owner and what opportunities for growth that can create, but also how to understand the ecosystem that they're engaging in and how to understand how to grow their business through data. So I appreciate the comment earlier, Dakri, that you identify that the most successful of those entrepreneurs really value data as an asset. And on that note, I want to kind of pivot to the partnership angle and how do you align the interest of all these stakeholders in an ecosystem, whether it's government or the community-based organizations that are really on the ground that have their finger on the pulse of what are those challenges. How can public-private partnerships be better structured to sustain those collaborations over time to create impact, real impact? And when it comes to digital inclusion and business innovation, how do you see the opportunity for those partnerships and partner-led efforts to have a pathway and a runway?
Absolutely. I think the number one way that industry can support community small businesses is to hire us. That sounds kind of, obvious, but that I think is something to kind of humanize the population we're talking about, right? Some are maybe solopreneurs, right? They're just a one-person team. Some have, like me, I have a team of 3. We have mouths to feed. And so we have to, kind of get out of survival and into a thriving space to be able to kind of think more about innovation. But I think when it comes to public-private partnerships, to have a lasting impact, things have to be community-led from the get-go. I think projects need to be designed with community leadership from the beginning. By and for the community, I think is the only way you get to long-term impact. One example I'd love to share, an organization that I've had the privilege of working with for the last couple of years called NC Counts. They're based in North Carolina. They're an incredible organization that was stood up for the 2020 census that has been able to sustain funding to shift to things like vaccine equity and now digital equity. And they received a private investment to create a micro grant program. And essentially they used data from another partner, Circle at Tufts University, to identify the top 10 counties in North Carolina that had the lowest amount of broadband adoption for NTIA covered populations. And then they put out an RFP to their membership. And essentially, these micro grants of about $10,000 helped community organizations in those counties hire a digital navigator from the community who understood the needs of the community to then work with county government to identify those needs to feed into the state digital accessibility and skills plan, the digital equity plan. And that was, something that maybe feels simple, right, to have the community speak for itself. But without that private investment, they would not have been able to do that. And so I think, really designing things around community roots is the way to establish public-private partnerships that will last.
Thank you so much. In this context, there is a role for the private sector to really play a meaningful role in not only closing the gap of digital infrastructure at a local level, but really translating, and I think this is a question for all the panelists as we close out, translating the national level platforms and narrative strategies that exist to really think about a place-based approach on how this really works on the ground. And you just touched on that point, that it needs to be rooted with the experience of those communities and of those business owners. And we all see in the room, and this has been part of the conversation all along, that when we talk about a subject, whether it's technology and you don't look at it necessarily as an enabler or looking at it from an ecosystem or education perspective, the national strategy and how that could be implemented sometimes looks very, very different as the tactical approaches and interventions that need to happen on the ground. Just open thoughts on what is an opportunity or perhaps a tactical intervention that you think could improve that connection and from a national to perhaps a state level or a county level or a local community level of alignment.
Yeah, no, in closing, thank you very much again for the opportunity here. I think that for me, the past experiences of being part of a public-private partnership, I think it's a strong enabler in that sense, having government be the bridge, not the sole source of it being, so that whatever different objectives, plans, opportunities that relate in the local communities or in a certain region, that then the private sector ends up moving forward with it afterwards, so that the government becomes the bridge on that aspect and not the sole source only. I think I've seen that before, that's been an experience, and it makes it a win-win, because at the end, like you're all saying, the local community, the local ecosystems, they know the challenges, they know the opportunities, they know where the gaps are, and certainly that builds together from that standpoint. Again, we're here available at DOT, and certainly look forward to meeting all of you and looking at ways that we can work and partner together.
Thank you.
I'll be very quick so that Daiquiri can bring us home. Transportation has 70,000-ish infrastructure projects right now going on around the country. You go across every federal department and there are opportunities, and all of these opportunities, when the dollars go out the door, there are requirements for utilization of small businesses. So if you are a small business that is almost in any industry looking for opportunities, you can go to the federal government, look at the procurement opportunities, and even if the contract or the opportunity is way too big for your business, all of the main contractors for the federal government are also required to utilize some amount of small businesses. Ford in the CHIPS and Science Act programs, so the CHIPS program, in the high-speed internet program, and a range of the things we did at the Commerce Department, we required all of the big dollars, whether they were going to states or they were going directly to big companies like Intel, that they had to show us a plan for how they were going to utilize small businesses. So there's a requirement right now for them to utilize many of these businesses. Small firms across the country should be looking at those big dollar contracts to see if there's an opportunity in their own community.
Thank you. no pressure, right, to bring it home. I totally agree, right? The opportunity to be a vendor is insurmountable, and I think the last panel talked about this well too. There's a lot of uncertainty and chaos, and I think one missed opportunity, right, would be because we don't exactly know what's going to happen with the BEAD program. I think there were a lot of plans for the utilization of small businesses, and a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So not just in the economic sense, but if you're investing in better broadband for each community, that includes small businesses. And so I think I would encourage kind of the folks here today to look into what's happening with BEAD and really advocate for small businesses, for communities, for this investment to go where it's needed most.
And just as a closing thought, and thank you again for all the panelists, to all the panelists for joining us, is the fact that if we are driving policy pathways conversation around digital infrastructure for Latino businesses, they need to be at the table. Hispanic and Latino businesses need to be part of that conversation to drive that policy conversation forward. So thank you again to HTTP, and thank you for you panelists for joining in this great conversation.